It's Halloween season, something that I wasn't really actively thinking about when I went back and finished Fatal Frame 4 the other day. For those of you who don't know, Fatal Frame 4 released on Nintendo Switch a couple of years back, I think in 2023 or 2022, and I never really went back and finished it. I got about halfway through, gave up, and stopped because I thought the game was kind of slow paced. I thought it was boring. I was not a big fan of the combat, the structure, and especially not the multiple protagonists, which I found to be overly confusing. I didn't like the game, and so I made the decision to like just not finish it. And I only really came back to it because of the announcement that Fatal Frame 2 was going to be remade for Nintendo Switch 2. And I thought that, considering I was it looked interesting and Fatal Frame 2 is a classic, I thought it was about time I went back and finished Fatal Frame 4. So I went back, uncovered the mystery of Ruka's past, ooh, and then went up a tower, fought the final boss, played a really obnoxious piano mini game, and that was it. And honestly, I felt initially that the game was kind of a disappointment, because I've been told over the years that this is considered like one of the worst Fatal Frame games, that it's not all that good, that it's not scary for a wide variety of reasons, that the game isn't fun to play. And yeah, I kind of do feel the same way. That was kind of my intention, my feeling on it when I finished it is that yeah, there were things I liked about it, but at the end of the day, this wasn't like really a great video game or a great work of art. And for whatever reason, I think because it had been so long since I played the first half of the game, I actually did boot the game up and start playing it again. And to my surprise, I started enjoying it a lot more. Like that's the really odd thing about this is that now that I've gotten into the game, now that I know a little bit about it, now that I know a little bit about the setting, the characters, like the story, I was able to follow along with what was happening. Because the first time that you play the game, it throws all this weird bullshit at you, like, oh man, a bunch of girls weren't missing on the island, and two of them died, and they suffered from a mysterious disease, and two of them go back, and their third friend goes a little bit later. It's all so ridiculous. It throws so much at you, and you're supposed to just buy it. It feels kind of just contrived how things happen sometimes in these games, like how one of the girls gets a camera obscura, gains the ability to fight ghosts, successfully manages to exorcise one of them, and then immediately gets jumped by three more and just gives up and dies. It's like, come on, girl, you can do a lot better than that. For me, playing this game the first time, I was just very confused about the characters and what they were doing there, and just the world in general, and the setting. On a replay, when you actually do know a little bit more about what's going on, the story actually does become a lot more effective, because you do know, first and foremost, a little bit more about the ghosts. This is the big thing, the big turning point for me was that I actually went back and I went through the ghost list, and I started going through all these different ghosts, and I kind of realized that they're not random encounters. All these ghosts have a name. They all have an identity. They all have a background. They're all patients in the hospital. They all died from moonlight syndrome or whatever. They all have personalities and unique designs, and you see different ones as you go throughout. And they're not always wraiths either. Sometimes you see specters, kind of differentiating your between wraiths and specters is kind of interesting in this, because specters give you the actual storyline and they show you where to go, but you also have wraiths that are outright hostile to you for some reason. I've finished two of these games now, and I still have no idea why ghosts are so aggressive in Fatal Frame. But I was, looking at some of their designs, some of their backgrounds, and I found myself really surprised with how much I liked them, especially that weird dour face girl you see at the beginning. I'm just kind of I don't know, man. I kind of like her. The way she's always fucking around with people and just kind of showing up in windows and looking spooky. I'm just I'm kind of into it. Like I found it interesting like how much effort went into the world building. Like there's a lot of thought put into like, the hospital and how it functions and the patients there. Each of the five girls has their own room. That's something I noticed like, on my first playthrough, obviously, is that like, yeah, 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 you can go to your old childhood room. They all have like wildly different personalities, but you don't really appreciate the thought put into it until like you go back with like everything as like a after finishing the game. Like, the game actually does get quite a bit better when you go back and experience it again and just take a look around like at like each of these rooms and like learn more about each of the characters. Like there's a shocking amount of effort put into like each of the three characters and like their roles in the story. Like that was kind of my complaint, is that like Ruka was obviously the protagonist from the start, and then like you have Choshiro, who's just doesn't make any sense at all, and then you have like the other girl. But like with a little bit more like insight into like the story of the game, you do start appreciating them a little bit more. But that's kind of my mindset on this, is that like, why did the initial setup have to be so confusing? Because there's all this like weird like timeline shenanigans of like when each chapter takes place and like what's going on, like what happens to certain characters, and like you don't really get that like that conclusive of a of an answer for quite a lot of it. And I suppose that's what makes the game interesting. For me, like I do think it's kind of odd in this sense, because this was a Grasshopper manufacturer game, and I was always told that this doesn't really feel much like one, because it's a horror game and it's not action focused and like the grim tone or whatever. But like on a replay, I kind of see it. Like it reminds me a lot of No More Heroes in that sense, where you have like all of this setup with all these different characters. Like you're told things about them, but you're not it doesn't really do a whole lot with it. It kind of leaves a lot of it up to your imagination, and that's kind of the vibe that like I really loved about No More Heroes, and it's not something I really noticed about Fatal Frame 4 when I first played it, but like going through it again. I do like it a lot more this time. I've been having a lot of fun like replaying the game, encountering ghosts, kind of picking up on like some of the ghost names and their personalities, and like like what their backstory is. Like it's a lot more interesting than like I think I gave it credit for the first time around. And it's kind of really getting me fired up at like returning to Fatal Frame 5 as well, because you know my view of that game was always that like it was just a bunch of generic spirits. But I don't know, maybe they put the same kind of effort into it. I don't know. I don't know if it's a staple of the series. So yeah, like I am actually like, I guess I'm now a Fatal Frame fan, honestly, because I've been having like a shocking amount of fun like replaying Fatal Frame 4 in preparation for Fatal Frame 2. Like I'm probably gonna go back and play Fatal Frame 5 as well at some point. And I really have to wonder, like, am I alone in this? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm curious if like anybody else is like getting fired up for Fatal Frame, because this is absolutely the Nintendo series you should be playing every Halloween. Like that's kind of my mindset now, is that this is like my Halloween game, because like you could argue like the game isn't well made, it doesn't have good combat, it's not that scary, but at the same time you're like you're going around a haunted house like looking at stuff. I love the atmosphere and the vibe, like even if it's not scary, like I I kind of feel as if like Fatal Frame 4 has quite a lot good going for it, honestly. Like, it's not the best horror game ever, but like this is definitely something that kind of sticks out in the Nintendo portfolio as something that like, I kind of wish they did more of. They did more with. As of to date, like they've only produced like what, 3 Fatal Frames since they've owned it, like Spirit Camera 5 and this. So like I'm definitely curious if like there's an interest in bringing it back, because this is like Fatal Frame 2 is like the first re-release we've gotten. So hopefully this is building up to a proper Nintendo exclusive Fatal Frame 6. But I'm definitely very interested in playing like the other 3 games. I'm definitely curious. Like everyone agrees the like 2 and 3 are way better than the rest. So I'm definitely kind of curious in seeing like what that results in, and like what that Fatal Frame 2, in theory, could be a way better horror game than Silent Hill F next year. Actually, considering two's legacy, it almost certainly is. Like, and honestly, like, I kind of feel that way about the Fatal Frame IP in general, is that, like, I found myself far more enthusiastic about these games than I have Silent Hill and Resident Evil in recent years, because, these games are actual horror. They actually have a unique setup. They actually aren't pure action games. They actually do, like, emphasize the vibe and, like, the style. The chicks are hot as fuck. Like, like, I love Fatal Frame. So I'm definitely very curious about, like, seeing what happens uh, with the series going forward. It's definitely something that I think has a lot of potential with the horror game genre, especially because, like, Nintendo owns the IP now. So it's something that, like, I really would like to see going forward. And I'm curious if, just like, if there's ever going to be a point where Fatal Frame is, like, more well regarded than Silent Hill, because that's been the problem with Silent Hill 2 and F and, like, the blooper team stuff in general, like Resident Evil, is that, like, these games aren't good either. Like, people complain about Fatal Frame 4 and 5 being bad, but, like, I can tell you, as someone who's played both, that they're way better than, like, Resident Evil 7 or 8, or, like, the Western made Silent Hill games. Like, Resident Evil and Silent Hill haven't been good for 20 years at this point. And Fatal Frame never really had the same drop off in quality. It stayed a relatively pure Japanese horror franchise. So in theory, this could be the one that survives, like, the feminism onslaught and actually remains, like, based in traditional, like, the Japanese horror game franchise going forward. But I don't know. It's definitely an interesting possibility. And there's also, like, that big wild card that Nintendo could bring back Eternal Darkness at any time, but like that's probably not going to happen. I'm definitely, like, it's definitely really interesting, because horror is not a genre that Nintendo traditionally did a lot with. You could argue that, like, you know, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask have pretty effective horror elements. Majora's Mask is scarier than most horror games, I would argue, but, like, there is they've definitely never really delved into, like, pure horror. Like, they've like, they have horror elements in their games. Emio is great, but, never, like, a pure, like, traditional horror thing. So if they really put together, like, a high quality Fatal Frame 6, like, that could be really interesting. That could bring a lot of people in. That could be something really unique, but we'll have to see if that happens. But as it stands right now, we have Fatal Frame 2 coming. So that's something to look forward to for fans. And honestly, as of right now, I kind of want to go back and play some more Fatal Frame 5. So I personally will have a lot of Fatal Frame to play in the future.